Far away from Earth, in the silence of space, Alpha Centauri always looked like a normal star to human eyes. It was the closest star system to Earth, only 4 light-years away. And for centuries it had shined quietly in the night sky, but everything changed when one small space telescope caught something unusual. The story begins with a young astronomer named Daniel. He was not famous, not rich, and not powerful, but he had passion. Every night he would sit in front of his old computer, watching the signals from space. Most scientists looked at the big galaxies or black holes, but Daniel loved the stars near Earth. He wanted to know if one of them could hide a secret one. Cold evening, his telescope sent him data that looked strange, instead of a steady shining star. Alpha Centauri was blinking in a slow, repeating rhythm. It was not like the twinkle of normal stars, it was like a heartbeat. At first Daniel thought it was an error in the machine, but when he checked again and again, the same pattern appeared. It was too perfect to be random, too sharp to be an accident. Daniel's hands shook as he wrote notes, compared the data with old records from other observatories. And there it was, the same signal had been noticed years ago, but ignored as noise. Why would anyone ignore such a clear rhythm? He felt a chill run down his spine. This was not noise. This was a message. For the next few weeks, Daniel worked day and night. He cut off from friends, ignored phone calls, and even forgot to eat sometimes, every time he studied the data. The pattern grew more clear. It was a sequence. Like 1, 2, 3. Pause. Then 1, 2, 3 again. It was like someone knocking on a door, waiting for someone to open it. He sent his results to senior scientists. But most of them laughed. They said, "Stars. Flicker. That is normal. Or your machine is broken." But Daniel knew what he saw, and inside his heart, he felt that the universe was trying to tell him something. One night, when he was almost ready to give up, he decided to run the signal through an old computer program. The program was designed to search for patterns in languages. When he pressed enter, his screen flashed with a strange result. The blinking of Alpha Centauri matched the rhythm of a human heartbeat. Bodum, pause, bodum, pause, bodum. Daniel's eyes widened in shock. It was as if the star itself was alive, breathing, waiting. He ran outside, staring at the night sky. Alpha Centauri looked so small, just another point of light, but now it felt different. Like a giant eye staring back at him, he whispered, "What are you?" His voice trembling in the cold air. The next morning, Daniel sent his report again, this time attaching all the evidence. This time he did not get silence. Instead, 2 men in black suits arrived at his small home. They did not smile. They did not introduce themselves. They only asked, "What do you know about Alpha Centauri?" Daniel hesitated, then told them everything. The men looked at each other, their faces pale. Finally, one of them said, "You should forget this, for your own safety." Then they left without another word, but Daniel could not forget. He was more curious than ever. Why would they tell him to stay silent if it was only a normal star? Why did they look so afraid? Days turned into weeks, and Daniel kept searching. He hacked into old satellite data, hidden archives, and even military channels. What he found made his blood freeze. Alpha Centauri had been sending signals for over 50 years. Governments had known about it, but they kept it secret. They called it Project Echo, and they had already built special machines to listen. Late one night, Daniel received a hidden file. Inside the file were recordings of the signal, not just from telescopes, but from radio stations. He pressed play, and what he heard made his heart stop. It was not only blinking, it was sound, a low, deep vibration. Like a voice whispering in the dark. It was not in any human language, but it felt alive. It felt like a warning. Daniel sat in silence, sweat dripping from his forehead. If Alpha Centauri was not a star, then what was it? He remembered the old stories of giant alien machines called Dyson Spheres, structures built to trap the energy of a star. Could it be true? His mind raced, but his body felt heavy with fear. If this was real, then humanity was not alone. Dada was out there, watching, waiting, and maybe, just maybe, Earth was already inside their gaze. Daniel looked again at the tiny light in the sky. It no longer looked peaceful. It looked like a secret that could change the fate of the world. And Daniel was the first human brave enough or foolish enough to notice it. The discovery was no longer just science. It was survival. For if Alpha Centauri was not a star system but something else, then the question was not, what is it? But what does it want? The secret was no longer Daniel's alone. Governments had been hiding the truth for decades. But now the cracks were showing. Whispers leaked on strange forums, and blurry images started to appear on hidden networks. They showed Alpha Centauri not as a star, but as something covered. Something blocked. For the first time, powerful telescopes on Earth and in orbit began to focus on Alpha Centauri together. The more they looked, the more impossible the truth became. The light from the star was not natural. It was broken into sharp lines. Like light shining through massive panels. At first, experts called it dust clouds, but dust does not move in perfect straight shapes. And these panels were moving, turning like machines adjusting themselves. Daniel, sitting alone in his small room, stared at the data with wide eyes. The panels formed a ring, then another, then more. Piece by piece, the star inside was being swallowed by a giant shell. He whispered to himself, "This is a Dyson Sphere." The words tasted unreal, almost impossible. But the evidence was there. Someone had built a machine larger than a star. As the news slowly reached scientists around the world, fear began to spread. Some thought it was a new alien civilization, watching us from just 4 light years away. Others feared it was a dead world, a graveyard of a race that once ruled the stars. But one question cut deeper than all. If Alpha Centauri was covered, then why was it sending a signal like a heartbeat? Daniel dug deeper, his obsession now unstoppable. He accessed old space probes that had been forgotten in dusty archives. And in one probe's recording, he found images from decades ago. The photos showed giant metallic structures reflecting sunlight, but when Daniel enhanced the image, he saw something worse. The surface of the Dyson Sphere was not smooth. It was cracked, damaged, like something had attacked it. A chill ran through him. If this was a living machine, then maybe it was broken. Or maybe it had been in a war. And if there had been a war, then who was the enemy? Meanwhile, people around the world began to react. Some believed it was proof of God, a sign of higher beings. Others said it was only science, a structure built by aliens more advanced than humans. But there were also those who panicked. They feared that the builders were still alive and that Earth would be their next target. Daniel received another secret file one night. This one was not from a probe, but from a classified military telescope. The file contained videos of strange flashes near Alpha Centauri, like explosions, but silent. One frame showed a shadow. Not a ship, not a planet, but something enormous. Moving across the panels, Daniel froze, his heart pounding. The Dyson Sphere was not abandoned. Something was still inside. Days turned into sleepless nights. He tried to warn other scientists, but most doors were shut to him now. Governments had locked the truth behind sealed walls. But whispers of the hidden structure kept spreading. It was no longer just Daniel's obsession. It was the world's nightmare. More telescopes joined in, and finally, the terrifying detail was revealed. Alpha Centauri's star was not shining through the gaps as expected. Instead, the light inside seemed weaker, almost dying. It was as if the star itself was being drained. Drained not by nature, but by something feeding on it. Daniel stared at the numbers in disbelief. The star had lost nearly 10% of its energy in only a few decades. That was impossible. Stars burn for billions of years. They do not fade so fast unless something was eating it, or unless it was already dead. He leaned back, sweat dripping down his neck. If the star was dead, then what was powering the Dyson Sphere? Why did the panels still move like they were alive? And why did the signal continue to beat like a heart? A terrible thought grew inside him. What if Alpha Centauri was never a star at all? What if the light humans had seen for centuries was only a disguise, a mask hiding the true shape of the machine? A prison or a weapon, built by hands not human. Daniel could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the cracked panels, the silent explosions, the massive shadow moving inside. He imagined civilizations far older than humanity, building machines across galaxies, machines that could swallow stars, hide worlds, and maybe even destroy entire species. And now one of those machines was only 4 light years away. Staring back on his desk, the signal kept blinking on the screen. Dumb pause, ba-dum pause, like a heartbeat in the dark. But now Daniel no longer saw it as a call for help. Now it felt like a warning, like the sound of a cage rattling, and something inside waiting to be free. He turned off the computer, but the sound still echoed in his ears for the first time. Daniel wondered if humans should stop searching. Maybe some secrets were never meant to be found. Maybe Alpha Centauri was not a gift of knowledge. Maybe it was a trap. The discovery of the Dyson Sphere could not stay hidden forever. Whispers spread faster than fire, and soon the whole world demanded answers. Governments released half-truths, calling it a strange cosmic phenomenon, but the people did not believe. They wanted to know. If Alpha Centauri was not a star, then what was it? Behind closed doors, leaders of powerful nations met in secret rooms. They knew something the public did not. The Dyson Sphere was not silent. It was sending out signals codes, bursts of energy, and pulses of strange radiation, whatever was. Inside was not dead, and if it was not dead, it could be dangerous. A decision was made. Earth would send a mission, not a public one, not an open one, but a hidden mission known only to a handful of people. Its name was Project Horizon. The goal was simple on paper, but terrifying in truth. Travel to Alpha Centauri, enter the structure, and discover what lives inside. The crew was chosen carefully. 6 humans, each from different nations, each with special skills. Captain Alvarez, strong but haunted by past wars. Dr. Malin, a brilliant astrophysicist with a secret fear of the dark. Colonel Wright, a soldier, loyal only to orders. Nadia, the engineer who could fix anything. Raj, the medic, who had lost his family in a flood caused by climate change. And finally, Daniel, the astronomer whose discovery had started it all. Together, they would become the first humans to face the Dyson Sphere. Their ship, the Odysseus, was not the fastest, but it carried something new, a powerful drive that bent space and time, cutting the journey to decades instead of centuries. Still, even with the technology, the crew would need to sleep. Cryopods would hold their bodies in frozen silence as the ship drifted toward the alien machine. The launch was never broadcast at midnight. Under the cover of silence, the ship rose into the sky. Families were told the crew had gone on long-term research, but in truth, they were leaving Earth possibly forever. As the blue planet grew small behind them, Daniel whispered to himself, "We are chasing a ghost." The years passed in the blink of an eye, frozen inside the cold chambers. The ship sailed through the black ocean of space, carrying fragile human lives like seeds in a glass jar. When the cryosleep ended, the crew awoke with weak bodies and heavy hearts, and there it was, in the distance, filling their windows. Alpha Centauri, but not as they had known it. What should have been a star shining bright was instead a black sphere. Massive and endless, the Dyson Sphere covered the light. Like a coffin around a sun, it was not smooth, but cracked and broken in places. Jagged edges where light leaked through like blood from a wound. The sight made every heart in the crew pound with fear. They had left Earth searching for knowledge, but what they found looked like a tomb. Captain Alvarez gave the order to scan. The computers hummed, showing strange energy readings. The panels of the Dyson Sphere were still moving, shifting like the gears of a living machine. But worse, there were signs of battles. Scars of explosions frozen in silence. Something had once fought here, and maybe still lurked inside. The crew held their breath as they circled closer. From afar, the sphere looked endless. But now, small details appeared. There were towers, broken satellites, and even structures attached to the surface. They were not natural. They were artificial cities. Now silent and abandoned, Nadia whispered. "This is not just a machine. It was their home." Her voice cracked with emotion. To think an entire alien civilization had lived inside this dark giant, and now only silence remained. The thought was heavy. Like a shadow pressing down on the crew's hearts, Then they found it a massive gate. It rotated slowly, a hole big enough for their ship to enter, but the gate was scarred. As if something had forced its way through, Captain Alvarez hesitated. Every instinct told him to turn back, but the mission demanded answers, and Earth was listening, even from light years away, with a deep breath. He gave the order. The Odysseus drifted forward, crossing the threshold into darkness. Inside, there was no blazing sun, only artificial skies glowing weakly. Broken cities floated in silence, their towers shattered, their streets empty. The Dyson Sphere was not alive with glory, it was a graveyard. The crew sat in silence. Unable to believe their eyes, Dr. May's hands trembled as she whispered, "It's hollow, but there's air, atmosphere." Atmosphere. Pressure. Someone built this too. Live. Daniel stared out the window, his eyes wide with fear and awe. He could not stop thinking about the heartbeat signal. Was it calling them inside or warning them to stay away? Then, suddenly, their radios hissed. At first, it was only static, but slowly, a voice rose. Faint and broken, it was not human, not clear, but it was speaking. The crew froze, hearts pounding. The Dyson Sphere was not silent after all. Something inside had been waiting, and now it knew they had arrived. The massive gate of the Dyson Sphere hung in front of them like the mouth of a sleeping giant. It rotated slowly, its surface covered in scars, as if it had been attacked long ago. The Odysseus drifted closer, engines humming softly, the crew silent and afraid. Every eye stared through the glass as the darkness of the sphere swallowed their view. Inside, there was no burning sun, no blinding light. Instead, they found a strange sky glowing with artificial clouds, faint and pale. It felt like being inside a hollow planet. A world turned upside down. The walls of the Dyson Sphere stretched into infinity, covered in broken cities and massive structures. Everything looked abandoned, frozen in silence, but the air around them carried an invisible weight. Daniel's heart pounded as he whispered, "We are not supposed to be here." Captain Alvarez ignored the fear in his voice, his own hands gripping the controls tighter than usual. He gave the order to scan the atmosphere, and the results made everyone shiver. There was oxygen, nitrogen, pressure. It was breathable. This was not just a machine, it was a world built to keep something alive. The crew suited up and prepared to step outside. Each movement was slow, careful, like walking into a grave. When the ramp of the Odysseus opened, the silence of the Dyson Sphere hit them like a wall. No wind, no birds, no sound of life, only emptiness. Their footsteps echoed as if the walls themselves were listening. They stood on what looked like a massive landing platform. Broken vehicles lay scattered, their design alien, their purpose unknown. Some were burned, others torn apart, as if a great battle had taken place here. Nadia bent down, touching the metal, and found it was still warm. Her voice cracked as she said, "Something moved here recently. The deeper they walked, the stranger the ruins became." Towering buildings leaned against each other like broken teeth, bridges hung in the air, leading to nowhere. On one wall, Dr. May found carvings alien. Symbols etched into the stone. She traced them with her gloved hand. Whispering, "These are warnings, I think," but no one could read them. No one could understand what danger they pointed to. Then the radios crackled again, the same static as before, but this time the voice was clearer. It was not words, but sounds, long, low hums. Rising and falling, Daniel froze, recognizing the rhythm. It was the same pattern he had seen in the heartbeat signal. Badum pause, the Dyson Sphere itself was speaking to them. Captain Alvarez ordered them back to the ship, but something caught Daniel's eyes. At the edge of the ruined city stood a massive gate, different from the rest. It glowed faintly, its surface alive with shifting lights. He felt drawn to it, as if the sphere itself wanted him to see against. "Orders!" He stepped forward, his voice shaking as he whispered, "This is the entrance." The others hesitated, but finally followed. As they approached, the gate trembled and slowly began to open. A deep rumble shook the ground, dust falling from the broken buildings. The sound was not mechanical, it was alive, like the growl of something ancient. Nadia's breath caught in her throat as she whispered, "It knows we are here." Beyond the gate was a tunnel wide enough for mountains to fit. Its walls were covered with glowing veins of light, pulsing slowly, like blood flowing through arteries. The air was heavy, filled with a metallic taste that burned their throats. Every step deeper made their skin crawl, as if unseen eyes were watching them. Suddenly, Colonel Wright raised his weapon, his eyes narrowing in the distance. A shadow moved, quick and silent. Disappearing around the corner, the crew froze, weapons ready, hearts racing. They were no longer alone. They followed cautiously, their footsteps echoing like thunder in the silence. The tunnel split into many paths, each one darker than the last. On one wall, they found more carvings, this time showing figures running, fighting, falling. It looked like a story of war and death. Dr. May's voice shook as she whispered, "The builders were not safe here. They were hunted. The deeper they went, the stronger the hum became. It was no longer just sound in the radios. It was vibrating in their bones. The Dyson Sphere was alive, awake, and aware of them. Daniel's mind spun with terror and wonder. Had the builders left it behind? Or was it built to trap something inside? At the end of the tunnel, they reached a chamber, vast and endless. The floor was covered in machines, broken and shattered. Above them, massive cables hung like vines in a jungle. In the center, a structure pulsed with light, beating like a giant heart. Daniel's breath caught, his entire body trembling. This was the source of the signal, the heartbeat of Alpha Centauri. But before they could move closer, the shadows returned. Dozens of shapes emerged from the darkness, tall, thin, with glowing eyes. They moved silently. Surrounding the crew, weapons hummed, lights flickered, and fear gripped every human heart. The Dyson Sphere was not abandoned after all. Something had been waiting inside the entrance, waiting for them to come. The chamber was filled with silence. Broken only by the low hum of the beating core, the crew stood frozen as the tall shadows surrounded them, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. It was as if time itself had stopped. Captain Alvarez raised his hand, signaling the crew to hold their fire. The beings were strange, thin as skeletons, their skin pale and cracked like old stone. They did not speak, but their eyes burned with a strange sorrow, not anger. Daniel felt his fear soften into something else, a sense of pity. These were not soldiers, they were survivors. One of the creatures stepped forward, its movements slow and weak. It raised its long fingers, tracing shapes in the air. Symbols of circles, stars, and broken lines. Dr. May watched carefully, her voice trembling as she whispered, "They are trying to speak." The crew activated their translators, machines designed to capture rhythm and tone. At first, there was only static, but then a broken voice emerged, weak and tired. "You are not them," the voice said, echoing through their helmets. The crew exchanged confused looks, their fear mixed with shock. The creature continued, "You are new. You are from." Outside, Daniel stepped forward, lowering his helmet shield so they could see his face. He spoke softly. "We come from Earth, from another star. We do not mean harm." The alien tilted its head, its glowing eyes dimming. May, then it whispered a single word that made Daniel's blood run cold. "Prison." The chamber grew heavy with silence again. Dr. May's hands trembled as she asked, "Prison? What do you mean?" The alien turned slowly, pointing its thin hand toward the pulsing core. It whispered again, "Not star, not home. Prison." The crew's hearts sank. The Dyson Sphere was not built as a paradise, not as a city of light. It was built to contain something, to lock it away, and the survivors they now faced were not its rulers, but its prisoners. The aliens led the crew deeper into the tunnels. Their steps were weak, their bodies frail, but their movements carried ancient pain through shattered corridors and broken halls. The humans followed, until finally they reached a hidden city carved into the wall of the sphere. It glowed faintly with alien fire, a fragile flame in the endless dark. Here, thousands of survivors lived, their bodies thin, their eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. Children clung to their parents. Elders sat in silence. And all of them stared at the humans with a mix of fear and hope. Daniel's heart ached. For this was no army. This was a people barely holding on. The Dyson Sphere was their cage, and they had been trapped for centuries. Maybe longer, inside the city's center. The crew was brought before a great hall. Symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly with energy. The leader of the survivors stepped forward, older and weaker than the rest. His voice cracked as the translator struggled to catch his words. "We built the sphere long ago to hide from the darkness." The crew leaned forward, their faces pale. The leader continued, "The darkness came. It eats the stars. It drinks their fire. It grows with every world it takes." He pointed to the cracked panels of the sphere. "We built this cage to hold the darkness inside, to trap it. But the cost was our freedom." Nadia's voice shook as she whispered, "So, Alpha Centauri is not a star." The leader nodded weakly. "The star is gone. Only the cage remains." The crew stood in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on them. Humanity had always dreamed of finding life among the stars, but what they found was a warning. The survivors told more, their voices heavy with sorrow. Generations had lived and died inside this prison, never seeing their real sky. Some had tried to escape, building ships to flee into the black, but none returned. Others had tried to fight the darkness inside, but their weapons were useless. Now, only a broken people remained, clinging to survival in the shadows of their own creation. Daniel looked at their thin faces, their glowing eyes filled with quiet pain. He whispered, "Why send the signal? Why call us here?" The leader's eyes dimmed as he spoke. "We did not call. We called you." Daniel's blood turned cold. The heartbeat signal was not a message from the survivors. It was a cry from whatever was locked inside the core. The crew sat in silence, their minds racing with fear. The Dyson Sphere was not just a broken relic. It was a warning to the galaxy, a reminder that something terrible could not be destroyed, only contained. And now, humanity had stepped into the cage. Captain Alvarez looked at his crew, his voice heavy. "We came seeking answers, but we may have brought danger back to Earth." No one spoke, for they all knew the truth. If the prison was breaking, if the darkness was waking, then no world was safe. Daniel closed his eyes, the hum of the heartbeat echoing in his skull. The survivors had given them knowledge, but also a choice. Either leave and risk carrying the darkness with them, or stay and face the nightmare inside. And deep within the sphere, the heartbeat grew louder, faster, stronger. As if whatever was inside had begun to stir, the heartbeat of the Dyson Sphere grew louder with each passing hour. It was no longer a faint rhythm in the background. It was a drum pounding in their bones. The survivors whispered of old prophecies, of the day when the prison would weaken, and now as the humans walked among them, the whispers turned into cries of fear. Daniel could not sleep, his mind racing with the leader's words. The signal had not come from the survivors. It had come from the darkness itself. It was calling, reaching out beyond the sphere. Searching for new prey, he sat alone, staring at the pulsing lights in the distance. Each flash felt like a warning, or perhaps a countdown. Then it happened. The sphere shook violently, dust falling from the cracked ceilings of the survivor city. Children screamed, buildings trembled, and the hum turned into a roar. The ground split open in places, exposing massive machines buried beneath. For centuries they had been silent, but now they awakened. Colossal guardians rose from the ruins, machines taller than towers, their eyes glowing red. They were built long ago to defend the prison, to keep the darkness contained, but their sensors detected the humans as intruders, not allies. The crew stood frozen as the machines turned toward them, weapons unfolding like claws. Colonel Wright shouted, raising his rifle. But Captain Alvarez stopped him. "Firing will only make it worse," he warned, his voice tense. But the machines did not wait. Beams of light cut through the city, shattering walls. The survivors scattered in panic,
Ow.
their cries echoing through The hollow world, Nadia screamed as one of the beams struck near her. The ground erupting in fire, Raj pulled her to safety. His own arm burned by the blast. The crew had no choice. They had to run. Through the shattered streets they fled, guided by the survivors who knew the hidden tunnels behind them. The Guardians marched each step, shaking the ground like thunder. Daniel's lungs burned as he ran, his mind torn between fear and awe. These machines were not enemies by design, but relics of war. Once they had protected life, now they hunted blindly, unable to tell friend from foe. The true enemy was still locked in the core, waiting, watching, feeding. The crew stumbled into an ancient hall deep below the surface. The walls were carved with stories. Glowing faintly with alien light, they showed the history of the builders, their desperate fight against the darkness, how they forged the sphere, how they sacrificed their star to power the prison, and finally, how the Guardians were built to defend it for eternity. Dr. May's voice cracked as she whispered, "But eternity is broken. The Guardians had mistaken the humans for invaders. And in their blind defense, they were destroying the very survivors they were meant to protect." The chamber shook again, the hum growing into a scream. Daniel fell to his knees, clutching his head. He could hear voices now, whispers curling inside his skull. They were not in words, but in feelings, hunger, anger, and endless emptiness. The darkness was not just awake, it was aware of them. The leader of the survivors approached, his eyes dim but steady. He spoke with a calm that chilled Daniel to the core. "You woke it when you came. Feels your light. It wants more." Daniel shook his head, his voice breaking. "We didn't mean to. We only wanted to know the truth." The leader's voice grew sharp. "Truth is death. Leave if you can, before it spreads." But leaving was no longer simple. The Odysseus was trapped on the other side of the sphere. Guarded by the awakened machines, every path back was blocked. Every step forward led them closer to the pulsing heart of the prison. The crew stood at a crossroads, fear pressing down. Like chains, stay and face the darkness, or die trying to escape. Captain Alvarez clenched his fists, his voice heavy with command. "We came here to discover. But now our mission is survival." The crew nodded, though their faces were pale. They had traveled light years for knowledge, only to find themselves caught in a war older than humanity. Then the ground split open beneath them. From the cracks poured black mist, thick and alive. It slithered across the floor, reaching for their feet like hands of smoke. Raj gasped, pulling back just in time as the mist devoured a broken wall. The stone crumbled into dust in seconds, as if eaten by invisible jaws. Daniel's eyes widened in horror. The darkness was not just a shadow, it was hunger given shape. And now it was no longer contained to the core. It was leaking out, spreading through the sphere. The survivors screamed, fleeing deeper into their ruined city. The crew stumbled after them, their hearts pounding like drums. Everywhere the mist touched, life ended, stone crumbled, and machines withered. The Guardians fought back, firing their beams into the black fog. But even their colossal strength was slowly consumed. Daniel looked back one last time. The pulsing heart of the sphere glowed brighter than ever. Each beat was louder, faster, shaking the hollow world apart. The darkness was no longer sleeping, it was waking. And the humans had arrived just in time to witness the prison begin to break. The Dyson Sphere trembled like a dying beast. The walls of the hollow world cracked, spilling rivers of black mist into the ruined cities. The Guardians fought desperately, their colossal weapons tearing through the shadows. But for every strike they landed, the darkness grew stronger, feeding on their light. The survivors wailed in terror, their thin voices echoing through the tunnels. Children clung to their parents, elders collapsed in despair. They had lived their whole lives in a prison. But now the prison itself was breaking, and with it, the last barrier that kept the galaxy safe. The Odysseus crew huddled in the survivor hall, their faces pale with fear. Captain Alvarez gripped the table, his knuckles white. "We cannot fight this," he said, his voice heavy. "But maybe we can choose how this ends." The crew looked at him, waiting, afraid of what choice he meant. Daniel's mind raced, the hum of the heartbeat echoing in his ears. He felt as if the sphere itself was speaking to him. drawing him closer. Every beat was stronger now, almost desperate, and in those vibrations he heard something more than hunger. He heard temptation, a promise of power, a voice whispering, "Release me, and I will give you everything." He shook his head violently, whispering to himself, "No, it's a lie." But deep inside, fear battled with hope. What if the darkness could save Earth from its own dying future? What if the prison had never been meant to last, and humanity was destined to inherit what was inside? Dr. May broke the silence, her eyes wet with tears. "If we leave now, the darkness will follow us," she said. "It will spread to Earth, to every world we know." Her voice cracked as she whispered, "We cannot take that risk." Nadia slammed her fist against the wall, her voice shaking. "Then what? Stay here and die with them?" Her words echoed, raw with fear. The crew stood divided, their hearts pulled in two directions. The leader of the survivors entered the hall, his body weak, but his eyes steady. He pointed to the glowing heart of the sphere. "This is the lock," he whispered. "We can close it again, but it needs power, life, sacrifice." The crew froze, the weight of his words pressing down like chains. To seal the prison again, someone had to stay. Someone had to give everything. Captain Alvarez straightened, his face hard as stone. "We came here knowing we might never return," he said. "If that is the price, then we pay it." But Daniel shook his head, stepping forward, his eyes burning with fire. "No. This was my discovery, my mistake." "It should be me," the crew shouted in protest. But Daniel's heart was already decided. He had brought them here, chasing the signal, chasing the truth. Now the truth demanded his life in return. He looked at Alvarez, at May, at Nadia and Raj. "I can't go home knowing Earth will burn because of me," he whispered. The survivors led them through the tunnels. The ground shook as guardians fell in the distance, swallowed by black fog. The heartbeat roared louder, each pulse cracking the walls of the prison. Finally, they reached the great chamber again. The heart of the Dyson Sphere glowed like a star. Throbbing with unholy light, Daniel stepped forward. Feeling the vibrations crawl through his skin, voices whispered in his mind, promising freedom, promising salvation. He ignored them, focusing only on the faces of his crew, the family he had. Found in the cold of space, he whispered softly, "Tell Earth to stop searching." Nadia sobbed, grabbing his arm. "Don't do this, please." But Daniel only smiled weakly. "For the first time, I feel like I know why I was born." With slow steps, he placed his hands on the glowing core. The light flared, blinding as the sphere roared like thunder. The crew shielded their eyes. The survivors fell to their knees, the heartbeat quickened, faster, louder, shaking the hollow world to its bones. Then slowly it began to fade. The black mist recoiled, hissing, as if dragged back into the cracks of the sphere. The guardians rose again, their eyes turning blue. Returning to silence, when the light dimmed, Daniel was gone. Only the faint echo of his voice remained in the static of the radios. "Maybe Earth was never safe," he whispered. Before the signal ended, the crew stood in silence, tears running down their faces. The prison was sealed again, but for how long? The survivors bowed their heads, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They knew the darkness would rise again one day, and when it did, another choice would have to be made. The Odysseus returned to the surface. Scarred but alive, they looked back one last time at the endless black sphere. It loomed behind them, silent once more, its heartbeat hidden. But in their hearts they knew the truth. They had not escaped. They had only delayed the inevitable. As the ship drifted back into the stars, Captain Alvarez whispered into the recorder, "Alpha Centauri is not a star system. It is a prison, and the monster inside is waiting for the day the lock will fail again."